Some days begin like any other. You wake up, wash your face, sip a cup of coffee, watch the sunlight stretch across the window. It all seems fine until something small happens. A rude message, a careless remark, someone cuts in line, a horn blares. Or maybe the microwave simply won't turn on. And suddenly, something inside you breaks loose. Not because it's serious, but because you've been holding in far too much for far too long. You smile in meetings, nod politely at colleagues, play nice with strangers. But underneath it all, something is piling up, unprocessed, unspoken. Have you ever felt that way? Outwardly calm, inwardly a storm waiting to erupt. You don't scream, you don't lash out, you just feel tired, numb, and sometimes lost within your own skin. And what hurts the most, it's not what people do to you. It's realizing you no longer understand yourself. There's a saying I once heard, if you don't train your mind, it will train you. It sounds philosophical, but it's not. It's a warning, because the untrained mind is not neutral. It's willed, reactive, restless. It will grab the wheel when you least expect it, speed up your thoughts, hijack your peace, and make you a stranger in your own body. Most of us live this way, dragged around by emotion, pushed by anxiety, fueled by unseen anger. Let me tell you a story, not about a monk, not about a philosopher, but about someone ordinary. Someone like you. His name was Andrew. Andrew was 34, worked at a design firm, had a long-term partner, lived in a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood. Life from the outside was stable, predictable, manageable. But inside it was something else. Andrew wasn't the explosive type. He didn't shout, didn't vent, didn't let his emotions show. Instead, he swallowed them. The stress, the rejections, the backhanded compliments, all of it, packed neatly into silence. He'd come home every evening, drop his bag, and just sit. Not to relax, but because he didn't know what else to feel. The TV stayed off, the lights dim, and the air, thick with a quiet tension that never quite lifted. Sometimes it doesn't take a crisis to break you. All it takes is one final drop. And for Andrew, that drop came on a Saturday night. He and his partner were arguing over something trivial. Who forgot the keys, maybe? Voices were low, tones sharp, nothing unusual, until she said, "You're always like this, always on edge, like you're about to explode." And that was it. Andrew didn't respond. He didn't argue. He just stood up, grabbed his car keys, and left. The city was quiet, but not his mind. He drove for hours without direction. One street, then another. His thoughts louder than the engine. Memories surfaced. Old resentments, words left unsaid, moments he wished he'd handled better. Everything boiling up all at once. Eventually he parked near a lakeside park, got out, sat on a bench. It was cold. His hands trembled slightly. He pulled out his phone, not to call anyone, just to escape his own head. YouTube opened automatically, and there it was, a black thumbnail with white text. You don't control what happens, but you can control how you respond. He clicked, not out of curiosity, but because he had nothing left to lose. The video spoke about Stoicism, not as a theory, but as a way of surviving the storm. It said, calm isn't indifference, it's strength. It's choosing not to fall apart when everything else does. Andrew had never heard anything like it. Not in therapy, not from friends, not even in self-help books. For the first time, something clicked. That night, Andrew didn't sleep. He stayed up watching videos, reading about ancient Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus. Their words didn't offer comfort. They offered responsibility. It's not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. If something controls you, it owns a part of you. Choose not to be harmed, and you won't be. Andrew realized something no one had taught him before. Calm isn't a personality trait, it's a practice. The next morning he made a quiet decision. Before reacting, he would breathe. Before speaking, he would pause. Before sending, he would reread. And slowly, over time, something began to shift. The anger still came, the tension still visited, but he no longer gave them the keys. He learned to let the emotion knock without opening the door. He walked more, journaled when things got loud inside, stopped trying to win arguments, and started winning clarity. Weeks later, he wrote this in his journal. I used to think I needed to be right. Now I just need to be whole. You see, Andrew wasn't special. He was just someone who found a better way to live with himself. And if he could change, so can you. In the next part of this journey, I'll show you how. You'll see why calm isn't reserved for the few, but forged by those who train for it. You'll learn how to build stillness, not from silence outside, but from clarity inside. But before we move on, ask yourself something. When was the last time I lost control? And if I could return to that moment, what would I do differently? Because that question might just lead you back to your peace. Principle 1, calm is trained, not born. We tend to believe calm people are born that way, as if some are simply wired to stay composed, while others are doomed to panic, overthink, and react. But let me tell you the truth the world rarely admits. Calm isn't a gift. It's a skill. And like any skill, it doesn't appear overnight. It's trained, forged, repeated, until it becomes part of who you are. Think of it like a muscle. If you never practice stillness, how can you expect to hold on to it in chaos? If you never train your mind in peace, how will it stay steady in the storm? We live in a culture obsessed with speed and stimulation. Everything screams for your attention. Every app wants your time. Every voice demands a reaction. So when someone says, just be calm, it feels almost insulting, as if calm is as easy as flipping a switch. But it's not. Calm isn't the absence of pressure. It's what you cultivate in the middle of it. I once met a firefighter who told me the hardest part of his job wasn't the flames. It was keeping his mind clear while people screamed, alarms blared, and smoke blinded his vision. He said something I never forgot. We train to stay calm when the building burns, so we don't burn with it. That's what Stoicism teaches us too. You don't wait for the world to calm down before you do. You train now so you're ready when it doesn't. You might think, but I'm not in life or death situations. Maybe not, but your nervous system doesn't know that. It reacts to an angry email the same way it reacts to a tiger in the woods. Heart races, breath shortens, mind tightens. And if you don't notice it, if you don't interrupt the spiral, your emotions take the wheel. Again. So how do you train calm? It begins small, not with grand meditations or spiritual retreats, but with a breath. One breath, taken with full awareness, has the power to reset everything. And the more you practice that breath during ordinary moments, the more it will be there for you during extraordinary ones. Imagine this. You're in traffic. A car cuts you off. Your first instinct? Rage. But instead of slamming the horn, you grip the steering wheel, inhale deeply through your nose, and exhale slowly. That's it. No drama, no lecture, just awareness. You don't need to suppress the anger. You just need to delay your response long enough to choose something better. That small delay, that's your training. And every time you succeed, even a little, you're reinforcing the muscle of calm. Now imagine stacking these moments. A delayed response in a tense conversation. A choice to pause instead of scroll. A decision to walk away instead of argue. These are micro repetitions. And repetition is the heart of mastery. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Notice, he didn't say you were born with peace. He said realize it, as in bring it into being. That takes practice. Daily, quiet, intentional. And often no one sees your effort. There's no applause for the breath you took instead of yelling back. No reward for the silence you kept instead of defending your ego. But your soul knows, your body remembers, and your mind begins to trust you. Here's something else no one tells you. Most people lose their calm not because they're weak, but because they've never been taught how to build it. They think reacting is normal. They believe overthinking is just how their brain works, but that's not truth. That's untrained thinking. Let's bring this down to earth. Suppose you get an email, someone criticizes your work. Maybe it's unfair, maybe it stings. You feel the heat rising. Fingers rush to reply, but you stop, you stand, Step away from the screen. Get some fresh air. Maybe journal for 5 minutes. Then you return, not as a boiling pot, but as a calm presence with clarity. What changed? Not the email, not the other person. You did. That's training. Training calm also means building internal rituals, tiny anchors you can return to. Some examples: a phrase you whisper in stressful moments. Not everything deserves my energy. A posture, shoulders back, jaw unclenched, feet grounded. A reset routine. Wash your hands, take a slow walk, touch something cold. A cue. The moment you notice your breath quicken, you slow it down. These aren't magic tricks. They're signals to your mind that you're taking charge again. And the more you use them, the less your environment controls you. Remember this: you don't rise to the level of your intentions. You fall to the level of your training. That means your calm isn't tested when you're relaxed on a Sunday afternoon. It's tested when your plans fall apart, when someone lies to your face, when life delivers another blow and your hands are already full. In those moments, you don't become calm. You reveal whether you have trained for it. So ask yourself, what am I doing daily that builds the version of me I respect? Where am I letting comfort win over composure? And perhaps most important of all, what would happen if I started treating calm as a practice, not a personality? Because if calm is a choice, then every moment is a chance to return to it, not to be perfect, but to be prepared. And the world belongs to those who are. Principle 2, the 90-second rule. There is a moment, brief and silent, when everything inside you begins to shift. Your chest tightens, your breath shortens, your thoughts speed up. Someone says something, you feel disrespected, misunderstood, attacked. And before you realize what's happening, your emotions take the lead. You raise your voice. You say what you didn't mean. You react. Then afterward, guilt, regret, a question whispering at the back of your mind. Why did I let that moment own me? What most people don't realize is this: the storm you felt inside, no matter how intense, was biologically brief. According to neuroscientist Jill Bolte Taylor, the chemical reaction that occurs when you're emotionally triggered lasts about 90 seconds. That's it, 90 seconds of physiological response. Your brain flooding your system with stress hormones, preparing you for fight or flight. But after that, it's no longer the event keeping you upset. It's you, it's the story you tell. It's the replay loop. It's the mental rehearsal of what you should have said, what they meant, what they deserve. We turn a 90-second chemical ripple into hours of emotional captivity, not because we have to, but because no one taught us how not to. The Stoics knew something modern science is only now confirming. Seneca warned that the one who angers you conquers you. He meant it literally. When you let someone's words hijack your state, you lose authorship over your next action. You're no longer responding. You're reacting. And once you're reacting, you've already lost. The tragedy is not that we feel angry. Anger is part of the human experience. It's the energy of boundaries, the voice of wounded values. The tragedy is that we let anger act for us, decide for us, speak for us. And once it does, it rarely speaks wisdom. It shouts, it wounds, and it never looks back to clean up the mess. But what if you trained yourself to pause, not to suppress, not to pretend, just pause, to allow the first wave of anger to rise and pass? That's what the 90-second rule is about. It's not a trick. It's not spiritual bypassing. It's a form of mental leadership, a decision to stay seated in your own center while your body does what it's wired to do, and to wait quietly, steadily, until you are ready to return to the wheel. Here's how it works. When something sets you off, your amygdala, the brain's ancient alarm system, fires up. It screams danger. But the amygdala doesn't know the difference between real danger and imagined insult. It can't distinguish a betrayal from a sarcastic email. It only knows the signal, threat. Your job is not to stop the signal. Your job is to notice it and stay conscious through it. That's where your training begins. So what do you do in those first 90 seconds? You slow your breath, you unclench your jaw, you drop your shoulders, you say out loud if needed, "This is passing." You imagine the chemicals rising, peaking, and falling, like a tide that doesn't need to be fought, just survived. You count, you feel your feet, you look out the window or walk into another room, not to escape, but to reclaim distance between the trigger and the response. That space, that's the difference between pain and damage. Think about it. A stranger makes a rude comment. In 2 seconds, your whole day is on fire. But if you had just waited, if you had just given it a minute and a half, would it still deserve your energy? Would it still feel like it mattered? Most of the time, the answer is no. But we don't give ourselves the gift of that space. We rush. We obey the emotion. We confuse speed with strength. But the Stoic knows, true power doesn't rush. It waits, it watches, it chooses. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." What does that mean? It means the real triumph isn't in lashing back. It's in staying rooted while they stumble. It's in staying silent while they expect an outburst. It's in choosing presence over performance. Because the world doesn't need more loudness. It needs more calm minds in the fire. Let's make this practical. Here's a ritual you can adopt. Something simple, repeatable, powerful. When you feel the heat rising, breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds. Hold your breath for 4. Exhale slowly for 6. Repeat this for 90 seconds. While doing it, visualize the emotion as a wave. It builds, it crests, it dissolves. You don't resist it, you ride it. And when the wave subsides, you ask yourself, what does this moment actually require of me? 9 times out of 10, the answer won't be shout back. There's a kind of dignity that comes with self-restraint, not coldness, not suppression, but sovereignty. You walk away not because you're weak, but because you refuse to be dragged into someone else's storm. You speak slowly, not because you lack emotion, but because you've learned to master it. And you don't react, because you've made peace with the fact that not everything deserves your reaction. That's the 90-second rule. It's not just a technique, it's a philosophy. One that says, my peace is not for sale, my attention is earned, my anger doesn't get to choose for me. And once you train this, people will notice, not because you tell them, but because you walk differently. You're not easily moved, not easily provoked. And even when everything feels like it's collapsing, you hold your posture like a lighthouse in the storm. That kind of presence, it's rare, it's memorable, and most of all, it's trained. If this kind of discipline speaks to something inside you, if you're ready to stop reacting and start responding, then this path is for you. Subscribe to True Stoic Way, where we're building a community of quiet power. People who choose clarity over chaos. Comment below. I ride the 90-second wave, and let's keep sharpening together. Principle 3, strength in stillness. There's a kind of strength that doesn't rush to defend itself. It doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't clench its fists. It doesn't explode when things go wrong. Instead, it stands still, rooted, unmoved, not out of apathy, but because it has nothing to prove. That kind of strength often goes unnoticed in a world addicted to noise, but once you encounter it, you don't forget it. Because in the middle of chaos, stillness becomes a kind of power that can't be faked. We live in a culture that mistakes intensity for authority. The louder someone is, the more right they must be. The faster someone moves, the more progress they must be making. But if you've ever stood in a room with someone who is fully calm, fully composed, you know something else is true. There's nothing more commanding than presence. Not presence that demands attention, but presence that doesn't need it. The kind that feels unshakable, not because it resists emotion, but because it has mastered the discipline of not reacting. Imagine a battlefield, not just of war, but of daily life. Deadlines crashing, people arguing, your plans unraveling in real time. And yet, someone stands at the center of it. They don't interrupt. They don't flinch. They assess. They breathe. They respond only when necessary. That person might not say much, but their clarity says everything. They are not detached. They are focused. They are not passive. They are choosing their response deliberately, and that is strength. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome and commander of armies, woke up each day and reminded himself not to be provoked, not to be shaken by flattery or insult or inconvenience. He ruled an empire, and yet he understood that ruling himself was harder and more important. In his meditations, he wrote, "Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved, and the raging of the sea falls still around it." This was not metaphorical. It was his daily practice. To remain steady in a world of shifting tides. To act from principle, not impulse. From understanding, not emotion. From wisdom, not pride. Stillness isn't about being quiet. It's about being grounded. It means that your emotions may rise because you're human, but they do not immediately become your actions. You allow space between what you feel and what you do. And in that space, clarity is born. You see what really matters. You choose what actually deserves your voice, your energy, your movement. Think of a leader you truly respect. Not the one who dominates the room, but the one who listens with intent. Not the one who fires back in anger, but the one who absorbs tension without passing it on. These people radiate something rare. They speak when it counts. They move with precision. They don't waste words or energy trying to be impressive, because they don't need to be impressive. They're already grounded. It's easy to react. It's easy to interrupt, defend, criticize, or retaliate. It takes far more strength to stay still for a moment, to feel the anger, the urge, the ego, and not obey it. Not because you're weak, but because you've trained yourself to choose differently. Stillness is not suppression. It's not stuffing things down and pretending to be unaffected. That leads to bitterness, disconnection, and eventual collapse. Stillness is awareness. It's feeling the wave rise and choosing not to ride it blindly. It's hearing the insult but not allowing it to enter your core. It's sitting in discomfort and letting it pass through you, not define you. This doesn't come naturally. You aren't born with stillness. You build it, and you build it in the moments no one else sees. When you hold your tongue instead of correcting someone for the 5th time. When you pause before replying to a message that hits a nerve. When you choose to breathe rather than escalate a conversation that's already tense. Every one of those moments is a rep, a quiet repetition of power, and over time they shape who you become. There's a story of a martial arts master whose student once asked, "Why do you never seem angry in a fight? You never shout, never panic." The teacher smiled and said, "Because if I'm not calm, I've already lost. If I can't hold stillness in here," he pointed to his chest, "then my opponent already owns me." That's not just combat wisdom, that's Stoic philosophy in motion. Because most battles we fight aren't against others. They're within us. And most of what defeats us was given permission to do so. Let's be honest, stillness feels strange at first. When someone is rude, your body wants to react. When things go wrong, your instinct is to fix, control, or resist. But the first time you remain calm, the first time you choose to be steady, you'll notice something profound. The moment loses its power over you. You begin to realize that staying centered is not weakness, it's protection. Not in the sense of building walls, but in choosing which storms deserve to touch your inner world. And most don't. Here's something practical you can begin today. Choose one moment to practice conscious stillness. Maybe it's in traffic. Maybe it's when a coworker interrupts you. Maybe it's during a disagreement with your partner. In that moment before you speak, pause. Scan your body. Slow your breath. Ask yourself, does this moment require me to move, or does it require me to stay? It won't always be easy, but it will always be worth it. Because the more you train this, the less you'll be moved by chaos. And the more others will begin to wonder how you remain so composed, so unshaken, when they can't even keep themselves together. Stillness is not silence, it's presence. It's the willingness to stand tall in discomfort without fleeing or attacking. It's what allows you to respond with clarity instead of regret. And it's what makes you powerful. Not the kind of power that demands respect, but the kind that earns it without saying a word. You don't have to be louder to be stronger. You don't have to rush to prove your point. You don't have to match the energy of the chaos around you. Instead, you can stand, and when you do, when you hold your posture, your breath, your values, you become the anchor in the room. And no matter how loud the world gets, the anchor never moves. Principle 4, life isn't fair, and that's okay. At some point, you will do everything right and still get overlooked. You'll show up early, you'll give your best, you'll treat others with respect, and someone else, less honest, less committed, less kind, will walk away with what you thought you earned. You'll sit with the sting of it, staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., asking a quiet question that lives in all of us. Wait, going, why do I try so hard when life keeps rewarding the wrong people? We don't ask that out of weakness. We ask it because we want life to make sense. We want to believe that effort equals outcome, and that virtue will always be recognized. But here's a truth that Stoicism whispers, one most people never want to hear. Life isn't fair. It never promised to be. And that's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. You were not born into a balanced system. You didn't enter a game with even rules. Some people start ahead. Some are born into chaos. Some are rewarded for appearances, not substance. And some people will break every rule and still win. If you expect the world to reward your integrity, your patience, your effort, you'll be disappointed again and again. But if you live by principle, not for applause, but for alignment, you win something far greater, self-respect. And that's the kind of reward that unfair systems can't take away. Seneca once said, "Don't hope that events will turn out the way you want. Welcome events as they happen. This is the path to peace." He wasn't telling you to like injustice. He was telling you to stop giving it your peace. When you tie your inner state to external fairness, you become fragile. You allow the world's chaos to decide when you're allowed to feel calm. You give strangers and systems the power to disturb your soul. But Stoicism gives you another option: to live with clarity even when life is clouded, to act with dignity even when no one's watching, to keep your posture upright even when the ground feels uneven beneath you. That's not giving up. That's rising up from within. Let me tell you a story. Her name was Rachel. She worked in the same department for 9 years, never missed a deadline, always helped her teammates, quiet, humble, competent. Then came the promotion. She applied, she prepared. Everyone assumed she'd get it, but the role went to someone else, someone newer, louder, less experienced, but connected. Rachel didn't make a scene. She didn't lash out. But inside, something cracked. She began questioning everything. Was I too quiet? Was I naive to think hard work mattered? For weeks, she considered quitting. Her heart felt heavy. Her mind burned with resentment. But one morning, she picked up a journal and wrote one sentence: "I won't let someone else's shortcut ruin my path." That was the turning point. Rachel didn't stay out of bitterness. She stayed out of principle. She knew that if she walked away in anger, she'd carry that anger into the next place. So she stayed, but with a shift. She didn't try harder to please. She didn't play the game louder. Instead, she doubled down on her values: clarity, consistency, quiet strength. And 6 months later, she was offered a position at another company, this time with people who noticed what others missed. She didn't chase revenge. She built readiness. And when life finally opened a door, she walked through it with grace, not spite. That's Stoic victory, not because she won over others, but because she didn't lose herself. So let me ask you, what do you do when you've done everything right and it still goes wrong? Do you burn with resentment? Do you blame? Do you collapse into self-pity? Or do you say, "This is not what I wanted, but I'm still the one who chooses what I become"? That's the real test, not how you act when you're rewarded, but how you carry yourself when you aren't. Life doesn't need to be fair for you to live with integrity. Let me say that again. Life doesn't need to be fair for you to be free. Your peace is not a product of perfect circumstances. It's the result of practiced clarity. You don't wait for the world to treat you right. You treat yourself right and navigate the world from that inner compass. Sometimes you'll walk into a room and not be seen. Sometimes you'll be misunderstood. underestimated, even betrayed. But if you stay committed to truth over ego, if you show up for your standards more than your pride, you walk taller, you sleep deeper, and you no longer need fairness to feel whole. So how do you live this? You begin by expecting challenge, not to be cynical, but to be ready. You remind yourself that setbacks don't erase your worth, they simply redirect your path. You let go of the fantasy that things must be just before you can be at peace. And you choose peace, not as a reaction, but as a decision. One moment at a time, one breath at a time. Still feel the anger rising? Good. Use it, not to attack, not to blame, but to build. Let that energy fuel your next step. Let it push you toward refinement, not revenge. Let it strengthen your discipline, not corrode your mindset. The Stoics didn't suppress emotion. They rechanneled it. They asked, what would it look like to remain calm even when I'm right to be furious? What would it mean to keep acting with integrity even when the system doesn't? That kind of life is rare, and that's exactly why it's powerful. The world will continue being unfair. People will still cut corners. Louder voices will get heard first. Some effort will go unnoticed. But you get to choose what stays sacred. You get to protect your internal structure. You get to train your mind not to collapse when outcomes disappoint. That kind of strength doesn't just change how you handle life. It changes who you are in life. And no injustice can take that from you. CTA, join the True Stoic Way. If these words speak to the part of you that refuses to break under unfairness, if you're building your character in silence while the world chases shortcuts, then join us here at True Stoic Way. Subscribe for more reminders like this, rooted in philosophy, grounded in real life. And if you're still standing tall, even when life doesn't play fair, comment below, I rise without revenge. Let's keep sharpening, quietly, relentlessly, together. Principle 5, you always have a choice. There are moments when it feels like something inside you just takes over. You hear a tone in someone's voice, and suddenly you're on edge. You see a message that rubs you the wrong way, and your entire mood shifts. You say things you later regret. You slam the door, raise your voice, walk out, or go silent. Not because you wanted to, but because you didn't pause long enough to choose otherwise. In those moments, it doesn't feel like you had a choice, but you did. It was just faster than your awareness could catch. And yet, that awareness, no matter how delayed, always returns. When it does, it often arrives with regret. You replay the scene thinking, why did I say that? Why did I let it get to me? But the deeper question is this: if you could go back, would you have acted differently? If the answer is yes, then what you experienced wasn't destiny. It was habit. And what is habitual can be retrained. The Stoics didn't deny emotion. They studied it. They understood that strong feelings were not flaws, but signals, early alarms from within. The issue was not the presence of anger or sadness or fear. The issue was what you did with them. And that, according to them, was always a choice. Not always an easy one, not always immediate, but a choice nonetheless. Seneca wrote, "Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power." It's a line that sounds simple, but its application is lifelong. To have yourself in your own power means you don't give your emotions authority over your actions. It means you don't let a bad moment dictate your entire day. And it means that even when your instincts scream for reaction, you respond with intention. Most people live their lives on emotional autopilot. They wake up, check their phone, and the first headline or notification already hijacks their mood. They walk through the day reacting not just to people, but to assumptions, imagined scenarios, internal narratives they never stop to question. And the worst part is they start to believe this reactivity is who they are. But that's not identity. That's untrained attention. The Stoics believed your mind was your most powerful domain, and also the most vulnerable if left unguarded. If you don't train your focus, the world will train it for you. And when that happens, you're not living, you're just responding. Choice begins with noticing. The next time you feel something rise, frustration, jealousy, resentment, pause. Even if it's just for 3 seconds, ask yourself gently, without judgment, what am I choosing right now? Because whether you speak or stay silent, whether you escalate or de-escalate, whether you act or delay, you're making a choice. The question is whether that choice is conscious. And if it's not, that's where the work begins. Let me give you an example. A man named Elias had a reputation for being short-tempered. He was smart, effective, and deeply principled, but everyone around him walked on eggshells. One evening during a family dinner, his teenage son made a comment that felt disrespectful. The old version of Elias would have responded in seconds, with authority, anger, and a sharp correction. But something in him hesitated. Not because he wasn't angry, he was. But in that hesitation, he saw the fork in the road. He realized he could win the argument and lose the relationship. He could assert dominance and bury trust. So instead, he excused himself. He stepped outside, stood under the night sky, and breathed. 5 minutes later, he returned, not calm yet, but more deliberate. And when he spoke, he wasn't defending his pride. He was protecting the bond. That moment didn't just change the evening. It changed how his son saw him. And more importantly, it changed how Elias saw himself. Moments like that don't arrive with warning signs. They appear suddenly, unexpectedly. And when they do, they test not what you know, but what you've practiced. You can't rely on theory in those moments. You rely on what's been rehearsed, even in silence. That's why the Stoics train daily, not in times of crisis, but in times of calm. They didn't wait for the storm to test their stillness. They built stillness so they'd be ready when the storm came. Choice is not about having full control over how you feel. You can't always prevent anger or pain or fear from surfacing, but you can prevent them from speaking for you. You can notice them, hold them, let them rise, and then settle. And when they settle, what remains is your clearest self. Modern psychology has a name for this space between stimulus and response. They call it cognitive flexibility, the ability to interrupt the automatic and choose the intentional. But the Stoics didn't use terms like that. They just lived it. They practiced stillness not to escape emotion, but to understand it. They observed their thoughts like clouds, passing, changing, never permanent. They knew that the first thought isn't always the truest, and the first urge isn't always the wisest. And so they waited, they breathed, they responded from principle, not from pressure. You don't need a meditation retreat to find that kind of presence. You just need to pause in the right moments. The pause between being insulted and choosing your reply. The pause between feeling ignored and choosing how to reconnect. The pause between disappointment and the story you tell about it. These pauses are not passive. They are incredibly active. They are the battlegrounds where reactivity loses and intention begins. And though they may seem invisible to others, they're transformative to you. You always have a choice, even when it feels like you don't, even when the situation is unfair, even when you've been triggered 1,000 times the same way. You still have that flicker of awareness, that breath, that pause, and in that pause is the seed of a different life. One where you're not constantly undoing damage, one where you don't apologize for things you never meant to say, one where your relationships are not built on fear, but on trust, one where your identity is not a reaction, but a reflection of who you've chosen to become. The difference between chaos and clarity is rarely grand. It's often found in a few seconds of awareness, a single choice made differently, a pattern interrupted, a response softened, a reaction delayed just long enough to become wisdom. And you already have that capacity, not because you're trying to be perfect, but because you're willing to practice again and again and again, because each time you choose your response, you reclaim a piece of yourself. And in that quiet reclamation, you become something few people ever learn to be, unmoved by impulse, guided by principle, and free, not from emotion, but from its rule over you. Principle 6, calm the body to calm the mind. Sometimes the mind spirals, not because of thoughts, but because the body forgot how to breathe. You're not angry, not yet, but your jaw is clenched. Your shoulders have crept up toward your ears. Your breath is shallow, barely reaching your chest. And before you can form a clear thought, your body has already declared war. Every muscle is on edge. Every signal says something is wrong. But what if nothing's wrong, except that you haven't paused long enough to notice the tension you've been carrying for days? What if the storm in your head is just a mirror of a body that's been running in silent panic? The Stoics understood that the mind cannot rule if the body is in rebellion. They may not have had neuroscience or heart rate monitors, but they watched nature, watched themselves, and learned something. Modern science is only beginning to confirm you cannot calm your thoughts while your body believes it's under attack. Stillness, they taught, is not just a mental state, it's a physical posture, a way of inhabiting space, of reclaiming your breath, your stance, your pace. And until you return to your body, your mind will keep chasing shadows. Think about the last time you lost control, not dramatically, but in small, invisible ways. The way your voice tightened when you felt judged, the way you snapped at someone who did nothing wrong, the way you felt anxious all day without knowing why. Chances are, long before your mind became chaotic, your body had already begun to whisper, and you didn't hear it because you weren't home. You were stuck in your head, spinning, worrying, overanalyzing, trying to fix things at the level of thought, when what you really needed was to return to your breath. The breath is the oldest tool we've been given. It's always available, always free, and yet it's the first thing we forget. We inhale with panic. We exhale in haste. We treat oxygen like a resource to exploit, not a rhythm to honor. But when you slow your breath, your entire nervous system takes a step back. The muscles soften. The pulse eases. The fog lifts just enough to see clearly again. The Stoics didn't speak about the parasympathetic nervous system, but they knew what it meant to settle the animal inside, to breathe as a way of reclaiming command. There's an old story of a philosopher who, when insulted in public, remained completely still. When asked later why he hadn't responded, he said, "My body was too tense. I knew anything I said from that state would be unclean." That's wisdom most people never reach. The understanding that a tight body speaks with a sharp tongue, that the words you speak from tension rarely carry truth, only defense. And so, he waited. He walked. He sat. He breathed. And only when the tension had passed did he decide whether the insult deserved a reply. Most of the time it didn't. Modern studies show that regular physical movement, walking, stretching, even light exercise, reduces anxiety and improves emotional clarity. But the Stoics knew this without a lab. They walked not just to arrive somewhere, but to return to themselves. Seneca often walked alone at dusk, using the rhythm of his steps to quiet the day's noise. Marcus Aurelius used cold water to shock his mind into presence. Epictetus taught that your body is your training ground. If you can't manage your reactions in physical discomfort, how will you endure emotional trials? They weren't preaching fitness. They were preaching integration, a philosophy that lives in your posture, not just in your mind. So how do you begin? You start with attention. Right now, notice your shoulders. Are they tense? Notice your jaw. Is it locked? Your hands, are they curled without reason? This isn't about judgment, it's about signal recognition. These micro-tensions are messengers. They don't need to be fixed. They just need to be seen. Because once seen, they begin to release. Not all at once, but slowly, like a body remembering that it's allowed to rest. Next, return to the breath, not dramatically, not performatively, just with reverence. Try this simple rhythm. Inhale slowly through your nose for 4 seconds. Hold for 4. Exhale through the mouth for 6. Repeat that 5 times. No music, no need for silence, just breath and awareness. It won't change your life in that moment, but it will change the way you carry the next one. And that's everything. When your mind feels chaotic, don't always go inward. Go downward. Feel your feet against the floor. Stretch your arms wide. Roll your neck. Step outside and notice the way the wind touches your face. Do something with your hands. Knead bread. Wipe down a surface. Write a sentence with no agenda. The point isn't productivity, it's presence. These small movements bring you back to what's real. They slow the spinning. They anchor you to what's actually happening, not what your mind fears might happen. One of the greatest misunderstandings about Stoicism is that it asks you to be detached from your body, that it glorifies the mind at the expense of sensation. But the opposite is true. The Stoics wanted you fully in your body, alert, grounded, prepared, not numbed, not armored, but awake, because the body is where life is actually lived, and to ignore its signals is to walk blind through your own experience. There will be days when your mind feels like a battlefield, thoughts flying in every direction, old stories resurfacing, fear knocking at the door, disguised as logic. In those moments, don't try to think your way out. Walk, breathe, move your body in slow, deliberate ways, not to escape the mind, but to reset it. You're not abandoning thought, you're preparing it for clarity, and clarity only returns when the body no longer feels like it's in danger. Every Stoic practice begins with command over the self, and that command starts not with ideas, but with sensation. You cannot be mentally still while physically agitated. You cannot be emotionally grounded while breathing like you're under siege. So practice calm not as a mood, but as a posture, a breath, a walk, a stretch, a stillness held not in silence, but in flesh. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have every answer. You just need to come home to yourself more often. And the body is the front door. When the mind gets loud, listen to your shoulders. When the thoughts get fast, slow your steps. When your day feels like it's spinning, breathe like the world is already at peace, because your nervous system listens to every signal you send. And peace, true peace, begins when your body believes it's allowed to feel safe. Principle 7, calm is always an option. There's a misconception we carry, often without realizing it, that calm is something we must wait for, that it's a result, something granted to us when the world cooperates, when the room is quiet, when the people around us behave, and nothing unexpected happens. This belief is subtle but powerful. It leads us to structure our entire internal world around external circumstances. We start to believe that peace is conditional, tied to weather, tone of voice, calendar flow, or someone else's approval. And when those things fall out of place, as they inevitably do, we lose our footing completely. But the truth is simpler and harder to accept. Calm is not something we wait for. Calm is something we choose. And like all choices, it's available in more moments than we think. The Stoics never promised that life would be predictable. They didn't teach detachment from discomfort by pretending pain wasn't real. They didn't pretend that loss didn't hurt or betrayal didn't cut deep. But what they did offer, what they practiced and passed on, was the idea that inner steadiness is not owned by circumstance. It is created, reclaimed, and returned to again and again by decision. Marcus Aurelius, in the middle of war, illness, and political conflict, wrote in his private notes, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That wasn't just a Stoic phrase. It was a call to shift from reaction to response, from agitation to attention, from helplessness to internal command. We often treat calm as if it belongs to those who have more freedom, fewer responsibilities, or less emotional baggage, as if calm belongs only to those who can afford to disappear into stillness, who can pause in front of a sunrise without children crying in the next room, or bills pressing at their back. But if calm only belonged to the lucky, the wealthy, the unbothered, then Stoicism would never have survived the Roman Empire. Because the truth is, calm is not a privilege, it is a discipline, and it must be cultivated where it matters most, when it's least convenient. Think of how many times you've said something like, "If today goes smoothly, I'll feel okay. If they just listen, I'll stay patient. If nothing stressful happens, I can stay grounded." What you're really saying is this: my peace depends on something I cannot control. And in doing so, you have handed the world the remote control to your nervous system. You've agreed, perhaps unknowingly, to let chaos decide when you're allowed to be still. And that agreement robs you of your freedom. True calm is not about having nothing to react to. It's about knowing that reaction is not your only option. You don't need to explain yourself every time you're misunderstood. You don't have to follow every emotional impulse down the same well-worn path. You don't have to surrender your clarity because someone else is drowning in confusion. You can remain steady, not because you're numb, not because you're pretending, but because you've chosen to anchor yourself to something deeper than the circumstance. And that choice, quiet as it may seem, is what separates noise from strength. The Stoics understood that the mind is easily agitated when the body is tense, when breath is shallow, and when identity is wrapped too tightly around the outcome of external events. That's why they practice daily rituals, not out of superstition, but as reminders that we are not what happens to us. We are what we do with what happens. They walked, journaled, breathed, reflected, not to escape life, but to return to it with more awareness. Their calm wasn't passive. It wasn't soft. It was trained, built over hundreds of moments where they could have reacted but didn't, where they could have panicked but chose to pause, where they could have matched chaos with more chaos, but instead brought order from within. Let me be clear, calm is not the same as control. You cannot control how others speak to you. You cannot control the weather, the traffic, the market, or how your body feels every day. But you can control how long you hold tension. You can control how often you interrupt your thoughts with breath. You can control whether you meet stress with escalation or presence. And that control, though small at first, becomes the foundation of something much greater. It becomes trust in yourself. It becomes consistency, even under pressure. It becomes dignity, even in disappointment. There will always be reasons to lose your calm. There will always be triggers, disruptions, and little insults to your schedule, your values, or your sense of justice. But those reasons only have power if you assign it to them. The person who cuts you off in traffic may never know your name. The email you received in all caps may not have been written with any thought at all. The mistake you made yesterday might not even be remembered by anyone else. And yet, if you don't reclaim calm in those moments, you bleed energy. You leak focus. You surrender your clarity for what? For a narrative your emotions wrote before your judgment could respond? You're allowed to do better than that. And the beauty is, calm doesn't need to feel heroic. It can be simple. It can be walking slower, speaking more softly, pausing 1 second longer before you answer, feeling your feet before sending that message, sitting upright, not to impress, but to return to awareness. These small habits are not minor. They are the architecture of equanimity. They remind the mind, moment by moment, you are not at the mercy of the world. You are the one who gets to interpret it. That's the choice you always have, not just when things are easy, but especially when they're not. Calm is not something far away, waiting for your life to be in order. It's always within reach, if you're willing to stop chasing it and start claiming it. You might not feel calm right now. You might not feel like you're capable of it today, but the more you practice turning toward it, instead of waiting for it, the closer it gets. And one day, perhaps without noticing, you'll find that it's not something you search for anymore. It's simply how you move, not because the world changed, but because you did. Principle 8, you are not what happens to you. You've been hurt before, maybe recently, maybe years ago. It could have been betrayal, rejection, a failure so public it still echoes in your thoughts. Or maybe it was something quieter, something you never even told anyone, a loss, a word spoken at the wrong time, a moment where someone you trusted made you feel small, and somewhere inside that pain, something shifted. You started to believe that maybe this is just who you are now, the one who always gets left behind, the one who never gets chosen, the one who's too emotional, too much, too quiet, too cold, too late. But that's the lie pain tells you, because what happened to you is not who you are, and it never was. Stoicism teaches us something both liberating and uncomfortable. We are not defined by events. We are defined by our responses to them. That doesn't mean the event didn't matter. It doesn't mean the pain wasn't real, or that you're supposed to be grateful for it. But it does mean this: you are never required to carry the story someone else wrote for you. You can change the script. You can revise the meaning. You can become the author again, even if you weren't the one who started the first chapter. We live in a world obsessed with labels: victim, survivor, failure, success, introvert, overachiever, broken, resilient. And while some of those labels may hold truth, they are still just that: labels, temporary, fluid, changeable. But when we fuse our identity too tightly with our experiences, we begin to forget that we have a choice. We start to believe that what someone did to us is more real than what we choose to do next. We hold on to anger because it gives us a story. We nurture resentment because it makes us feel justified. We let wounds shape our worldview because they're easier to carry than uncertainty. But the Stoic doesn't live in narrative. The Stoic lives in now. Epictetus was born a slave. He had no rights, no property, no freedom, not by law, not by society's standards. But he refused to let that circumstance shape his character. He wrote, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And those weren't words scribbled from a position of comfort. They were forged in the fire of limitation, spoken by a man who had every reason to be bitter, but chose clarity instead. He understood a truth we forget far too often. You may not get to choose what enters your life, but you always get to choose what stays. So what have you been carrying that was never meant to stay? A belief that you're not enough? That one mistake defines your ability? That you'll always be the person who gets overlooked, misunderstood, underestimated? If you never challenge those stories, they become your identity. Not because they're true, but because repetition rewrites memory. And memory, if left unexamined, becomes a cage. Stoicism calls you to stop rehearsing the wound. Not because you need to move on, but because you were never meant to build your home in something that broke you. You are not your worst day. You are not the moment you fell apart. You are not the version of yourself that acted from fear or desperation. You are the one who learned. You are the one who stayed. You are the one who still chose to try again, even when it hurt to hope. And in that space, in that gap between what happened and what you choose next, that's where your identity lives. Not in what's been done, but in what you're doing now. Let me tell you a story. Her name was Layla. She spent most of her 20s trying to be what others expected: quiet, agreeable, high-achieving. She checked every box: degree, relationship, job title. But deep down, she felt like a shadow of herself. Then one spring, everything unraveled at once. Her partner left, on her job dissolved. Her body broke down from stress. She said, "For a while, I thought that was the truth of who I really was. Someone weak, someone unable to hold things together." But she was wrong, because 6 months later, she was standing in front of a classroom, teaching meditation to women who had lost everything. Not because her life had been fixed, but because she had decided not to live as the broken version of herself. She didn't wait for clarity to come. She created it action by action, day by day. That's the Stoic way. Not waiting for the world to validate your worth, but building a character so clear that even pain cannot distort it. It means your worth doesn't spike when you succeed, and it doesn't plummet when you fail. It stays, it holds, because it's rooted in principle, not praise. Your story does not need a dramatic rewrite. It just needs an honest revision. And that begins now. You can speak to yourself differently. You can hold your posture with more self-respect. You can release what you've used as armor and step into something more grounded, more calm, more whole. You can forgive, not to free them, but to free yourself from the loop. You can wake up tomorrow and decide to live not from what happened, but from who you've decided to become. When the Stoics said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality," they weren't downplaying trauma. They were pointing to the future. Because what lives in your imagination becomes the shape of your day. And if you don't examine what you're rehearsing, you might live a lifetime inside a single moment that didn't deserve your whole story. So here's the question: who are you choosing to be in response to what happened? Not what happened to you, not what they said, not what you lost, but what you did with it. That answer, that daily answer, is your real identity. And no one, absolutely no one, can take that away. If you're building your life on principle instead of pain, If you're no longer willing to let one moment define your whole story, then you've already started walking the path. Subscribe to True Stoic Way and stay anchored to a community that sharpens character, not ego. And if this part of the journey resonated with something inside you, comment below. I am not what happened, I am what I chose. Let the world see not just what you survived, but what you've become. Principle 9, learn to breathe, rule the mind. When the mind races, most people try to think their way back to calm. They seek logic, they chase answers. They argue with their emotions, hoping that clarity will win. But what if the way back isn't upward into the head, but downward into the breath? What if the fastest path to mental stillness is a thought, but an inhale? In the ancient world, the Stoics didn't speak in terms of neuroscience or biology. They didn't diagram the nervous system or study stress hormones in a lab, but they observed themselves. They studied discomfort. They paid attention to what brought them back to clarity when everything else was pulling them toward panic. And one of their quietest teachings, perhaps the most overlooked, was control of the breath. Not dramatic breathwork, not performance, just a simple relationship with oxygen, with rhythm, with the invisible tide inside the body that rises and falls without asking. Because breath is not just biological, it's philosophical. We often forget to breathe well, not because we're forgetful, but because we've learned to survive under tension. Modern life teaches shallow breathing, emails, phone calls, pressure to be somewhere else, to be someone else. We brace, we hold, we tighten, and in doing so, we send a signal to the body, something is wrong, even when it's not. Over time, this becomes normal. We live with half breaths and quick inhales, wondering why we feel anxious even when life is quiet. But the body remembers. And when the breath remains fast, the mind remains unsettled. You cannot think clearly if the body believes it is under threat. This is not a theory, it's biology. Your sympathetic nervous system, responsible for the stress response, is always listening, and breath is one of its loudest signals. When you breathe fast, shallow, high in the chest, the brain interprets danger. Your heart rate increases, your muscles prepare to fight or flee. Your focus narrows, your thoughts race. But when you breathe slowly, deeply, from the diaphragm, something changes. The parasympathetic system engages. Your body begins to downshift. Your heart rate stabilizes. Your focus expands. And most importantly, your thoughts begin to slow down. You return to the present, not by force, but by rhythm. The Stoics taught that mastery of the mind begins with mastery of self. And the breath is the beginning of that path. Because unlike most parts of the nervous system, breath is both automatic and voluntary. It happens without effort, but you can also take control of it at any time. That bridge between involuntary and conscious makes breath the gateway to presence. You don't need hours of meditation. You don't need incense or silence. You need 3 slow breaths, and your world begins to shift. Try this. Sit up. Not stiff, but aware. Place one hand on your chest, the other on your abdomen. Breathe in slowly through your nose for 4 seconds. Hold for 4. Exhale gently through your mouth for 6. Repeat that cycle 4 or 5 times. Notice what changes, not just in your body, but in your thoughts. The tension doesn't disappear instantly, but the distance between you and the tension grows. And in that distance, perspective returns. You begin to see clearly what just moments ago felt overwhelming. The breath is not a magic cure. It won't erase pain or solve complex problems, but it creates the internal space necessary to face those problems with clarity. It allows you to pause, to soften, to reconnect to the deeper part of yourself that is not ruled by reaction. When you breathe intentionally, you are reminding yourself, I am not just this thought. I am not just this emotion. I am the one witnessing them, and I choose how to move next. That is where control begins, not in dominating life, but in guiding the mind gently back to awareness. Many of us try to control the outside world in order to feel peace. We plan obsessively, we control conversations. We seek perfect environments. We avoid triggers, but real control, stoic control, begins inside. It begins when you stop asking the world to be quiet. and start quieting the internal reaction to it. And that work often begins not with a thought, but with a breath. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, practiced morning and evening reflection. He knew that chaos was not something he could eliminate, but he could train himself not to mirror it. His meditations were not grand declarations. They were reminders to pause, to look inward, to choose restraint, to act from calm rather than urgency. And though he didn't write about breath directly, his entire method of thinking suggests a man who had learned how to slow down internally, even as the world around him demanded constant motion. You do not need to become a monk or philosopher to reclaim your breath. You simply need to remember it exists, and that it belongs to you, not to stress, not to fear, not to habit. In moments of confusion, breathe. In moments of decision, breathe. In conflict, breathe. Before you speak, breathe. Not because it's trendy or wise-looking, but because it's yours. Because it's the one thing you can access when all else feels out of reach. If you train nothing else, train the breath. It's subtle, but it carries everything. Anger softens when breath slows. Fear shrinks when oxygen flows. And clarity, which feels so far away when you're tense, begins to return, not by thinking harder, but by letting the breath clear the fog. You don't need to fight for calm. You need to breathe your way back to it, again and again. When you feel like everything is spiraling, ask yourself, am I actually in danger? Or am I just breathing like I am? Let that question guide you back. Let it break the trance of urgency. Let it become a ritual. Because when you learn to breathe, not just as survival, but as strategy, you begin to reclaim authority over the most powerful tool you have, your mind. Principle 10, return to the present. The mind has a habit of running. It runs forward into worry, what-ifs, and imagined catastrophes. And it runs backward into regret, resentment, and the endless loop of, I should have. Rarely does it stay here. Rarely does it rest in the only place where life is actually happening, now. We are taught to plan ahead, to learn from the past, to anticipate problems before they arrive. And in many ways, this is useful, necessary even. But there is a cost to always being elsewhere. When your attention is constantly traveling to moments that no longer exist, or to futures that haven't yet arrived, you begin to lose touch with the only thing you can truly influence. This moment, this breath, this step. The Stoics didn't dismiss planning or memory. They weren't opposed to strategy or reflection. But they believed that suffering multiplies the moment we allow our thoughts to take us somewhere our feet cannot go. Marcus Aurelius wrote, confine yourself to the present. He wasn't advocating apathy, he was issuing a warning. Because the present isn't just where action lives, it's where your power lives. It's the only time frame where you can choose, respond, breathe, redirect. The past is closed. The future is uncertain. But this moment, it's available. And if you miss it, you miss everything. Anxiety thrives in the future. Regret lives in the past. Both feed on absence, on the mind's refusal to land. You feel like you're working hard, but nothing's finished. You feel like you're constantly behind, but can't catch up. You wake up tired, go to bed tired, live in motion, but rarely in presence. And when someone asks, where are you right now? The truthful answer is often somewhere else. Presence is not simply about awareness of surroundings. It's a full return, a return to sensation, to breathe, to the internal permission to be where you actually are. The Stoics understood this not just as a technique, but as a posture of mind, a way to walk through life without being chronically haunted by it. Because if you can't come home to the moment, then you're always living displaced, even in your own skin. Let me offer an example. Imagine you've just made a mistake, a real one, a painful one. Maybe you hurt someone. Maybe you lost something important. Maybe you chose poorly, and the consequences are clear. What does the untrained mind do? It retreats into shame. It replays every word. It travels back in time, not to learn, but to punish. But what does the trained mind do? It pauses, acknowledges the mistake, and then returns to now, because only now can it do the repair. Only now can it take the next right step. All progress begins here. Or consider the opposite: a future you fear, a conversation you're dreading, a challenge you don't feel ready for, an outcome you cannot predict. You begin to script possibilities, invent worst-case scenarios, try to solve problems that haven't yet occurred and may never occur. You tense, you distract yourself, you live in a world that doesn't exist yet. Meanwhile, the present waits, patiently, quietly, offering peace that can't be accessed from 2 hours ahead. The reason presence matters isn't just spiritual, it's practical. You make better decisions when you're here. You speak more clearly when you're not reliving old fights. You notice your breath, your tone, your habits. You respond rather than react. Most of what we regret is said or done when we've left the moment, when we've returned to old patterns or reached ahead in panic. Presence interrupts that loop. It makes space for something new. Returning to the present isn't about perfection. It's about return, over and over. And the more often you do it, the faster the return becomes. Eventually, you'll feel the pull to escape, and you'll notice it. You'll feel the mind wander and call it back with breath. You'll catch yourself ruminating and gently say, "Not now." That's not failure, that's mastery in progress. One practice that helps: when the mind starts to spiral, engage the senses. Touch something real. Feel your feet on the ground. Name 3 things you can see. Listen for the farthest sound. You're not trying to drown thought. You're offering your attention an anchor. And slowly the spinning softens. You don't escape the problem, you just show up living inside it. Now you're in position to respond, not repeat. Presence is also the cure for rumination. Because when you're truly here, you're not arguing with what was. You're not guessing what will be. You're listening right now. And in that listening, you hear more. You feel more. You begin to see clearly again. Not through the fog of emotion, but through the clarity of attention. Marcus Aurelius understood that his responsibilities as emperor could overwhelm him if he let them all live in his head at once. So he gave himself instructions. Simple, practical, firm. He reminded himself to focus on the task at hand, to do the next thing with care, to act as if each moment mattered, because it did. That's presence, not exotic, not impossible, just steady. One thing, one breath, one decision at a time. Even now, as you read this, you can return. You can feel the breath in your chest. You can notice the tension you weren't aware of. You can realize how fast your thoughts were running and choose to slow them down. Not because there's nothing to worry about, but because worry isn't doing the work. You are. And you can only work with what's in front of you, never with what's gone and not yet with what's to come. There is no past so fixed that it must define your future. And there is no future so vivid that it deserves your peace today. All you have is this, and this is enough. Principle 11, use your hands, free your head. There are days when your mind feels like a tangled web, thoughts circling, no clear direction, just loops, repetitions, echoes of things unfinished, unresolved, uncertain. You try to journal, you try to meditate, you try to think your way through it, but nothing clears. Because not every mental knot can be untied with more thought. Sometimes the way out of the mind is through the hands. We forget how physical clarity is. We forget that the brain isn't just a concept, it's a part of the body. That anxiety isn't only mental, it's muscle tension, restlessness, shallow breath, tight jaw. When the head gets heavy, sometimes the most intelligent thing you can do is this. Stand up, move. Do something simple with your hands, not to escape the moment, but to enter it fully, to reconnect to something real, something you can touch, shape, feel. The Stoics, though often portrayed as thinkers, were deeply embodied. They walked, they labored, they believed in action, not just abstract contemplation. Epictetus, born into slavery, spoke not from the comfort of libraries, but from hard physical life. His teaching wasn't crafted in theory. It was built through discipline of the body and the environment. Seneca, though a writer and statesman, warned of becoming trapped in thought loops. He encouraged movement, craft, and even domestic routines as a form of returning to self. Because when the mind becomes untethered from action, it drifts, and that drifting, left unchallenged, can become suffering. There's something remarkable that happens when you use your hands with focus. It could be kneading dough, sweeping the floor, fixing something small in the corner of your room, folding laundry with presence, chopping vegetables slowly and deliberately. It's not about productivity, it's about re-entry. You return to your senses. You remember you're not just thought, you are also form. And the simple rhythm of movement gives your mind something it desperately craves: structure. Most of our mental chaos isn't caused by the number of problems we have. It's caused by the fact that there's no clear starting point. Everything feels urgent, everything demands attention, and so nothing receives it properly. But when you begin with your hands, just one task, one motion, one small piece of physical order, you reintroduce sequence. You remind your nervous system, we begin here, now, with this, and everything else can wait. Imagine this: you're overwhelmed, you feel stuck in a fog. You sit down at your desk, stare at the screen, and the cursor blinks without mercy. Nothing moves, so you stand. You go to the sink, you begin to wash the dishes, slowly, intentionally, without your phone, without music, just water. Movement, the feeling of warmth on your skin, one plate at a time. 5 minutes later, you return to your desk. Your breathing has slowed. The tension in your shoulders has softened, and the problem, though not solved, is now approachable. That is not magic. That is method. This is why artists, craftsmen, cooks, and gardeners often speak of peace not as an idea, but as something they find in process. The potter doesn't think peace. She feels it as the clay softens under her palms. The carpenter finds stillness not in silence, but in the measured pressure of a chisel against wood. When your hands are fully engaged, your thoughts are not gone, but they are no longer racing. They are riding alongside purpose, and purpose, however small, calms the mind. One of the most powerful practices you can adopt isn't meditative in the traditional sense. It's simply this: create something with your hands each day. It could be imperfect. It could be incomplete, but it's physical, and that makes it real. Write a letter by hand, sew a button, clean a drawer, draw a circle, water a plant. Let your fingers remind your brain that not everything needs solving. Some things just need doing, and that doing is healing. The Stoic doesn't seek escape from reality. He seeks alignment with it. And reality isn't just thought, it's sensation, motion, friction, temperature, texture. To be calm is not to float above life. It's to be grounded enough to carry life with grace. And the hands are anchors. They bring us back down, not to heaviness, but to simplicity. You may not be able to fix what's happening in your head, but you can scrub the floor beneath your feet. You can return order to your desk. You can put your body to work and let clarity follow. In one of his letters, Seneca wrote, "No activity can be successfully pursued by an individual who is preoccupied, and nowhere is one's mind less at ease than when moving among a multiplicity of concerns." And yet he followed that with advice not to withdraw from life, but to simplify within it, to return to essentials, to the motion of the moment. Today, this might mean turning off the noise for just 10 minutes and doing something tactile. No goal, no finish line, just presence. In a world of abstraction, that is revolutionary. This practice also breaks perfectionism, because your hands do not ask for perfection, they ask for attention. A broom doesn't need you to be wise, it needs you to move. A dish doesn't ask for insight, it asks for your hands, your water, your care. And when you give that, something else shifts. You stop trying to think your way into calm, you begin to embody it. We often say we want peace, but what we actually need is rhythm, ground, repetition, contact with the real. You've tried talking yourself out of overwhelm. You've tried thinking your way into clarity. Now try sweeping, try wiping the counter, Try folding one piece of clothing while breathing slowly and see what happens not in your home, but in your chest. Stillness is not always found in stillness. Sometimes it is found in motion that asks nothing more than presence. And your hands, humble, steady, ancient, know the way home. They've been trying to lead your mind back all along. Conclusion: calm is power. You've heard the word calm spoken many times in this journey, but by now you know it doesn't mean what most people think it does. Calm is not passivity, it's not weakness, it's not a luxury for the lucky few who have fewer problems and more peace. Calm is power, but not the kind that announces itself, not the kind that demands applause. It's the kind of power that walks into a room and shifts the atmosphere without raising its voice. It's the kind of strength that can hold silence when provoked and still remain present. The kind that can lose and not break. The kind that bends under pressure but does not fold. The Stoics never promised an easy life. They didn't offer formulas to eliminate pain or steps to manifest control over the world. What they offered was something much rarer, a way to remain intact no matter what happens. They taught that virtue wasn't found in dramatic declarations or perfect outcomes. It was forged in how you carried yourself in small, invisible moments. How you responded when the world wasn't fair. How you showed up when no one was watching. How you trained the mind to serve truth, not impulse. You've learned over these 12 laws that discipline isn't a rigid system. It's an act of self-respect. That anger is not power, it's the loss of it. That stillness is not silence, it's presence. That fairness is never promised, but composure is always possible. That emotion is part of life, but not fit to lead it. You've learned that your breath is a tool, your posture is a practice, your reactions are not destiny. You've seen how the body speaks long before the mouth opens, and how the mind will follow whatever rhythm you give it. You've learned that calm isn't a place you arrive. It's a way you move through everything. The world is still chaotic. People still disappoint. Life remains unpredictable. But you've changed. You don't need everything to go right to be centered. You don't need external peace to access internal steadiness. You've begun to lead yourself from the inside out. That's power. Let's take a step back and look at what you've been building, not in theory, but in practice. You no longer wait for motivation. You move with intent, even when emotion isn't on your side. You've stopped demanding perfection from yourself and others. Instead, you've started asking better questions. You pause, you breathe, you begin again without shame. You've realized that small, repeated decisions, quiet, almost forgettable, are what shape identity. And you've chosen to be someone you can trust. Someone who doesn't just talk about composure, but trains it. What does the calm person look like in a noisy world? They're not the one who's always smiling. They're not necessarily soft-spoken or serene. They're the one who can sit in discomfort without turning it into destruction. The one who can lose and still act with honor. The one who can say no without anger. The one who can say yes without seeking applause. They are often unseen in a culture that chases performance. But when things fall apart, everyone looks to them. Because calm is magnetic, and in a world addicted to reaction, your presence becomes a kind of sanctuary. There is no secret ending to this path. You won't wake up one day immune to anger or fear. You won't find the perfect routine that shields you from stress forever. But you will notice that you're more stable than you used to be, that your recovery is faster, that your responses are cleaner, that your mind, once chaotic by default, now knows where to return. That is the real victory, not to avoid storms, but to remain unmoved by them. And when you forget, and you will, you'll remember how to come back, not through punishment, but through practice. So what now? Now you live it, one morning at a time, one conversation at a time, one pause, one breath, one decision made from presence rather than programming. Not to impress, not to escape, but because you've seen the cost of living without it. And you're no longer willing to hand over your clarity to anything or anyone that hasn't earned it. You don't need to rush. You don't need to master it all today. You only need to remember, calm is not something given, it's something chosen, repeated, protected, like a flame that stays lit, not because the wind isn't blowing, but because you've learned how to shield it. So let the world spin, let others shout, let life unfold in all its unpredictable ways. You know the way back. You know how to pause, to see, to act, not from reaction, but from principle. And that ability, that steady return to yourself is what makes you unshakable. That is calm. That is power. If this journey has helped you reclaim your mind, if you've found strength not in intensity, but in inner stability, then don't walk this path alone. Subscribe to True Stoic Way and continue building with others who are choosing clarity over chaos. We don't chase perfection. We train discipline. We practice presence. We build character, quietly, consistently, and together. Leave a comment. I choose calm. I choose power. Let that be your final vote, not for who you were, but for who you've decided to become.